Hello, people. I am Jyotsna, and you are listening to my podcast, Just Being Jyotsna. I hope you're doing well, and I hope 2021 is treating you well. I know it might be a little early to decide if this year is doing good or not. By the way, the last one turned out to be, but I really hope that this year turns out great for all of us. And here I am with the second episode of Just Being Jyotsna. And this podcast is now available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, as well as YouTube. So, yes, I saw that a lot of people made New Year resolutions and a lot of people didn't as well, and I did not either. But what I did was make a to do list for the weekend that went by and not comply with it as well. So, to those of you who did make a New Year resolution and have managed to comply with it for the first 11 days of the year, I'd be tipping my hat to you if I was wearing one. So, yes, as I told you guys in the first episode, I somewhat love writing poems and I like to call myself a poet. So, I recently discovered something that can be called the beginning of my poetic career. Is career the right word? I'm not sure, but yes. So I was sitting in my room one specific day and I suddenly hear my mother started to read out from a page. So fortunately, my door was open. I sprinted out of my room and ran to see what she was reading out because I had realized what it was. And I took the paper from her hand and destroyed it because it was a page from what was apparently my personal secret diary from when I was 7 or 8 years old. And this secret diary is now scattered all around the house in loose pages. And I took up a mission to destroy any page of embarrassment that I could find. But I did find something interesting in it, which was a poem I wrote back then, which was a description of an alien, which goes, Alien, 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 I'm an alien from Mars, and goes on to tell about how the alien rides on a fox, how it wears a socks, and I found a gem. That made me wonder that it is quite interesting how a poet's mind works. So, every poet's mind functions differently, but it is pretty funny if you observe it. Because in my case, if I'm sitting in the dark, like now I'm not so scared of the dark, but I did believe in ghosts for a while and I'd be scared out of my wits when the power was cut off, and my brain would be completely convinced that I can clearly see a ghost standing in front of me, and I'd imagine that as the end of my life. But when the power would come back and I would realize that I'm not yet dead, my brain would dare to romanticize the same darkness. And it's the same case with anything from the lizard family, okay? So I think that my worst nightmares and my worst ideas of doom consists of reptiles. My brain dares to romanticize the same thing. So it's a bit of hypocrisy if you think of it. And more than hypocrisy, it is that a lot of poetic works come from an honest experience or an honest thinking, and some of them come from wonderings or imaginations that the poet can't relate to. And it is really hard to classify one of the methods of writing as better than the other. On the same line of thought, I more often than not, write about things that are very obviously carrying aesthetic value or things that are very obviously romanticized, like majorly nature and nature as a metaphor for basic emotions. And not that I don't like slam poetry, I love slam poetry. I just don't think that I am really comfortable with romanticizing the things that are not very obviously romantic. So, whenever I listen to a piece of slam poetry and or when I read a piece of poetry that is written on topics that are not obviously romantic or things that are not obviously aesthetic, like social issues or a personal experience, I am in real awe of the poet because it is really difficult to write about those things. What it requires is extreme observation of something that is not very clearly visible to the eye and not very clearly audible to the ear. Something that might seem very obvious, but something that no one looked into with great detail. And to amplify the small aesthetic value of that thing and to make the audience think about it deeply, that is a really difficult thing to do. I recently heard somewhere that a good joke is not one that instantly earns a major applause and laughter, but one that makes someone think about it and laugh about it in a later part of their day or any time later when they're doing something that is closely relevant to the joke. And that thing really agreed with me because it is true. Whenever you are focusing your attention on a piece of art, like this thing is not just relevant to humor, right? It's relevant to every piece of art, be it a movie, a series, a joke, or a song, or a poem. So, whenever you're focusing your complete attention on one piece of art, it is easier to observe its value or observe its beauty. But if one of these pieces manages to penetrate into your mind and makes you think about it sometime later when you are not focusing your attention on it, that must be a really good piece or that must have struck someone somewhere in the mind, right? So I thought that was a really good thing, and I guess that is what most artists aim to do. As I said, I hold immense love for poetry that talks about social issues or, that express the most intricate of an experience or emotions because expressive poetry is beautiful and a lot of the conventional poetry or the one I write, I keep calling it conventional. I'm not sure if it's the right word, but the poetry I write is descriptive, as in it describes the emotion or it describes the scenario, but expressive poetry is absolutely beautiful. Another thing I wanted to talk about today was the connection we make between the artists and their art. And when I say art, it is all kinds of it, like visual, auditory, audiovisual. So, yes, the connection we as an audience make between the art and an artist is really beautiful. Like in my case, as I said, I get deeply attached to the pieces I like. And whenever I see a movie in which I love somebody's acting, or I listen to a song, or I read a poem, I look up that person and I see more pieces of theirs, read about their life, and it just adds to the value of the piece that I already like. And the social presence of the person really makes a difference on how I perceive their art because if the real life social presence of a person, and what I mean by a real life social presence is when I see their interviews or how they interact with other people what their stand is on various issues, if that stand or if that social presence is something that I like or something that I admire or find pleasant, that instantly adds to the value of their work of art. And if the social presence, if I do not like the real life social presence of that person, or if in any way I do not like it, it somewhat reduces the value, the artistic value of their work. And this might be a very complicated perspective, because it is true that an artist, like for example, an actor, is not necessarily and in most cases, obviously not like the character they play in a film, but it is not just the similarity, right? It is, I think we as humans, I think we tend to make a connection, and that connection wires how we perceive their art as well. And while this might be a good thing as it adds on to the beauty of their art, this sometimes, especially in a country like India, where we have an excessive celebrity culture, moves in a negative aspect as well, because we start caring too much about what a celebrity from the entertainment industry said about politics or social issues, more than we care about what a person actually belonging to the political and social sphere said. This is again something I listened to recently, that it's not the actual job of a person from the entertainment industry to talk about political and social spheres, but it is actually the job of people from those spheres to talk about it. Because we are more connected, we for some reason feel more connected to people from the entertainment industry and their art, we tend to focus more on what they said. While it is very true that with the outreach they hold, with the social status they hold, comes a social responsibility of taking a stand, I think we need to focus more on what people actually from the sphere said about it. I guess that is about it. And yeah, also remember how I was saying about the weekend resolution, or something that is normally known as a to do list I made? One part of it was that I complete reading a book that I started, which was A Thousand Splendid Suns, which I know is a very famous book and was a bestseller, but I still wanted to say it again. The book is absolutely beautiful. I started I in the past 4 years I had completely lost all patience to sit and read a long piece of literature. So I started reading a proper novel after like 5 years, and it is such a beautiful book. The details of every struggle one faces, or the details of the depth of every character in the book, are so beautifully written. I have not yet completed the book, but if you love to read, if you like to read, this book is a must for you to read. It is absolutely beautiful. Once I'm done reading this book, I'll come up with a book review for this in one of my future episodes, because I know I would absolutely love to talk about this one. And that brings us to the end of this episode. And if you have listened to me talk till here, loads of love to you. And if you like this podcast, do share it. Do comment any suggestions for themes for future episodes, or any suggestions at all. Thank you very much. That's all. Bye bye.